Let me just pray. Father, we are grateful for what you have already done in our lives, giving us our lives, giving us the Lord Jesus, giving us the purpose for our living. And I pray that as Carol helps us to just walk through what that looks like for us, and particularly for these younger brothers and sisters, I ask that your presence will be real to us and that you will bless her sharing and her thinking, because we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Karibu sana.
So, as you've heard, my name is Kariuki. I want to give you a brief intro of who I am, and then we can get into why I'm here. My life has been an interesting one. I have been many places, I have been many things, I still am. I'm the kind of person who will probably be able to speak to you about almost anything. So talk to me about cooking, talk to me about cars, talk to me about travel, talk to me about aeroplanes, talk to me about construction. I'm with you. But I am a lawyer by training, and I am not a lawyer by practice. I quit practicing the law over 10 years ago because I did not get into law by choice. I wanted to get into much loftier things. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. It was too expensive. We couldn't afford it. And then I had my mind set on being an interior designer. But my mother said that, why do you want to go and paint houses? You passed your exams, can't go and paint houses. So do something professional, do something serious with your life. So I picked law because I figured law doesn't have too much in it. You just read all the time. And I love to read, so I can read. Hey, big mistake. It was 4 very painful years. And I always tell my husband that my law degree belongs more to him than it does to me, because he's the one who used to sit me down and get me to cram those cases and to understand the principles and to be able to recite them. Yes, so that's how I wound up in law. As you've heard, I'm married to my college sweetheart. We dated through campus, got married after 14 years this year. We have 2 daughters, aged 13 and 10. So our firstborn is doing her standard 8 this year. And that means that I am also a candidate. There's a lot of stress that goes in with being a candidate's mom. Right, so that's just a little bit about me. If we manage to get a chance to interact, you can perhaps get to learn a little bit more. How did I get myself here? When Joshua approached me, I had heard about this program because there's a certain meeting we usually have with Pastor Luke. And initially, we were supposed to have been meeting, I think, you guys meet on the 3rd Saturday of the month. So we were supposed to have been meeting on the 3rd Saturday. And then he comes up and says, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, guys. I can't do the 3rd Saturday anymore. I have this program I'm attending, and therefore we needed to move our meeting so that you guys could have your meeting. So I learned about it then. So when Joshua mentioned it to me, it wasn't new, but I wasn't really involved in it. And then he made the mistake of telling me that it was Pastor Nick Korir who was supposed to be here. And I'm like, really? You're having me as a replacement for Nick Korir? I'm like, okay. I almost said no, almost. But I'll tell you why I didn't. So the way I'm going to split this is I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I said yes to coming here. And then I'll tell you a few short stories about my life. I say the day I write my biography, it won't be a biography, it will be an anthology of short stories, because I don't think that I can tell my life in one continuous tale. It won't make sense. So we'll probably just have several short stories. So I'll tell you a few of my short stories, and then now we can get into purpose and what I think about purpose. So when Joshua asked me to come in, on the tip of my tongue was, no, I'm not qualified. I can't be the one to do this. I already knew that my pastor was part of the mentors here. He's part of the mentors here. Pastor Nick Korir is supposed to be speaking. I'm like, those are the ones I look up to. So how can I be on the same platform as them? But then I just finished reading a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Power of Yes. And what that book is, it's really another collection of stories about different people who have done things differently in their lives, who have dared to be different, who have dared to move out of what is considered acceptable and just do what they believe they are supposed to be doing. And the result for these people was really that they were able to get to know themselves better, that they were able to experience things that they would otherwise not have been able to experience. And I thought, all right, maybe I also have the power of yes. And then I thought about my own journey. And as Joshua said, I've been going through a season of just trying to figure out my own purpose and what it is I want to do with myself and my future. And one of the things that is very clear to me is that I need to be speaking more. I need to be telling my story. I need to be teaching. I need to be speaking. And here I am being given an opportunity to speak, and I'm almost saying no. I'm thinking, okay, you're not being very serious here. So I said, all right, let's do this. Then I thought about being a teacher. And one of the things that I do is I teach. I'm actually a lecturer at Strathmore University. And the beauty about teaching is that in the preparation to teach, you learn so much. Every single time you teach on a subject, it means you have to introspect on it, you have to read up on it, you have to convince yourself, you have to know how to convince others, you need to defend your position. So I thought, all right, if I'm going through a season of searching for my purpose, how better than to actually prepare to speak on purpose? Because then, for sure, I will also be gaining some instruction and some guidance from it. And then finally was something that happened just about a month ago, about 3 weeks ago. Heading out for this meeting we usually have with Pastor Luke. I get up, I get into the car, and I'm driving. And then it comes to me, be still, shush, keep quiet, listen to me. So I switch off the radio, and I say, okay, I'm going to drive in silence, and let's see where this goes. So I switch off my radio, and I drive. I don't think 20 seconds had passed before I received a message. And it came to me that, the Lord was asking, why was Jesus a carpenter's son? I'm like, okay. Is this a trick question? Is this a riddle? And then, I don't know, it's very difficult, when you're talking about when the Lord speaks to you, you're not sitting down and having a conversation. There are thoughts being placed in your head. You're not too sure where everything is coming in. But this was the essence of this conversation, whatever was put in my mind. And God had the ability to have made Jesus anybody's son. He could have been a shepherd's son. After all, he is the good shepherd. So who better than to teach him how to be a good shepherd than a shepherd? But God decided to make him a carpenter's son. Why a carpenter's son? And I thought about it and said, when a carpenter is making something, he doesn't go and pick random pieces of wood and start, cobbling them together, putting in nails and, saying, let's add a piece here, let's cut this down, and then looks at his contraption and says, let us make this a table. No. What the carpenter does is that he decides, I am making a table. What kind of table am I making? Am I making an ornamental table? Am I making a dining table? Am I making a coffee table? And based on that decision, then the carpenter is able to decide what wood is he going to use? What joints is he going to use? What kind of joining materials are going to be used? Are you going to use nails, bolts? Are you going to use just glue? What kind of finish? Are you going to paint the table, varnish it? Are you going to leave it raw? And all these decisions can only be taken after you know the purpose for which that table is going to be used. And I thought, what better place for Jesus to learn purpose than in a carpentry shop? Because he was not going to be sitting there, just planing wood randomly, aimlessly. No, everything had to be put together in a certain way. And even for us, we are also put together because God already knows our purpose. He already knows what it is that he has put us on earth to do. So the fact that you have a personality of some type, that you have your strengths and your weaknesses, that you have, a certain way you do things, is not by accident. It was there because those things are going to be used for God's purpose, not just because, let's experiment and see. If I make a person who is vibrant and yet introverted, let's see what happens. No, he already knew why you are that way. And on the day I was sharing this, The only reason I had the courage to share this is because the week before I went for a Bible study. And one of the things that we were studying was about Apollos, and how Apollos was such a fiery believer, and how, he went out preaching, but he knew not much, because he only knew up to the baptism of John. He didn't really know about the baptism by the Spirit. But he was fiery, and he went out and he preached. And I was convicted and said, you've received a message, do something with it. Are you then going to sit on it simply because you feel you are not well equipped? So I had the confidence to go out and speak of it. And when I went to this group and I shared this word, imagine my shock when I was told that, there's actually a verse in the Bible that is exactly what you are talking about. And this is Ephesians 2:10. And Ephesians, let me just read it for you. Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good work, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Not vice versa. He didn't create us and then discover what we can do. No. He has already created the good works. And when I looked at a couple of different versions, I thought that, this might actually, it was very interestingly put. So the contemporary English version has it like this. God planned for us to do good things and to live as he always wanted us to live. That's why he sent Christ to make us what we are. So the work is already there, waiting for us. It is in existence. It is not for you to, quote unquote, discover. The way, guys always say the whites came to Africa and they discovered the River Nile. What about the guys who were living along the Nile? What were they doing? So it's not for us to go and discover. It is in existence. So it is just for us to be placed there. The International Standard Version has it slightly differently. For we are God's masterpiece, created in the Messiah, Jesus, to perform good actions that God prepared long ago to be our way of life. So it's not about us. It is really about what has already been prepared for us. And so even as we go through these, it's really just about remembering that the works have already been prepared. We have already been made for that purpose. So therefore, it is really just for us to plug into it and then, make it happen. So because of all these things, I was therefore able to say yes. So here I am today, having said yes. So like I said, I'll share an anthology of, I think, 3 short stories about my life. I love handicrafts. I love working with my hands. I knit, I sew, I embroider, I do woodwork, I fix cars, I fix bicycles. So I love working with my hands. And for me, it is the beauty of watching different things coming together to create a whole that really makes it for me. And so these short stories just give you bits and pieces of the bigger picture. So my story number 1 is entitled Victim of Opportunities. We've all heard about, I'm a victim of circumstance. But I consider myself a victim of opportunity. I am that person, that quote-unquote lucky person who everybody, when you're in school, when you're in college, everybody hated because you always got the opportunities. You get into something and voila, it has happened, things are going well. But here's my story about being a victim of opportunity. I ceased being purposeful about my life in high school. I think the last true decision that I made for myself with regard to my career was in high school when I dropped biology. I had always wanted to be a doctor. I had told everybody in the world, I will be a doctor, I will be a doctor. But the teenage hormones did not do me good because now I felt pressure. When my parents expected me to be a doctor, I forgot that it was actually my idea and not theirs. So what is the best way to rebel against these parents who want you to be a doctor? Don't be a doctor. And the only way to not be a doctor is to drop biology, because for sure if I'd done biology, I'd have passed. And I would have been a doctor. So I dropped biology. And I think from that point, everything went haywire, because then I just started existing and I just started living through life. So I finished my Form 4 exams, I passed. I wound up in law. I did law, I finished. I said, now that I've finished law school, I finished university, the thing to do back then, we didn't go to Kenya School of Law. We would get an exemption. But you needed to do pupillage. So I said, it only makes sense that I go and I do pupillage. So I hunted for pupillage. I found a place. I did pupillage. I finished. I was retained in my place of work. I was miserable. I was so miserable. But I figured, you know what? Maybe it's the work environment that isn't doing me any good. I started looking for a job, was not successful. And I decided, you know what? I'll just stay here. Back then, there used to be a search engine called My Jobs Eye, where you register and you put up your profile, and employers are able to find you. So I had registered for this, but at some point I stopped because I was like, it's useless. I'm not getting any hits. Nobody's interested in me. I'm just wasting my money because you had to pay a monthly fee to access it. So I stopped. And then one day I receive a call, and somebody tells me, we have somebody who's interested in you. Silly me, my first answer was not who. My first answer is, where did you find my profile? He says, well, we run the organization. We have access to your profile. I'm like, but I haven't paid my subscriptions. You shouldn't have access to my profile. He's like, we run the system. We have access. So anyway, I didn't look for this job. It found me. And I was interviewed. I had what I thought was one of the worst interviews in the world. I was stressed. They made me miserable. I remember getting out of that interview room and just standing in the corridor and holding my head and thinking, oh my gosh, what was that? And then they offered me the job. I took it because, well, I was miserable where I was. And for 2 years, I practiced law. I did okay, but I discovered that I enjoyed managing stuff. And every time there was an opportunity to improve systems, I'd improve them. And the managing partner took notice. So one day, I guess the stirrings of looking for purpose had started calling. I went and I did a day of introspection, and I came back. And I told my boss, you know what, I'm in the wrong place. I don't want to do law. I know for certain that at age 40, I'm not going to be practicing law. So I don't see the point why I should be practicing it now. So I want to leave the practice. So he told me, give me 2 weeks to think about your resignation. What do you mean? It's my resignation to give. Why do you need 2 weeks to think about it? After all, I'm giving you 3 months' notice, so you have more than enough time to find a replacement. So I said, no, if you're not going anywhere, if you don't have a job, you just give me 2 weeks to think about it, come back. You can still resign in 2 weeks' time. So I did. And when I came back, he offered me a job. And he said, we've seen what you've done with the processes. We like it. Why don't you take a full-time job in management and administration? I was like, cool. Why not? After all, I'm not going to do anything. So I took that job. Year 1 was fantastic. I loved it. I was creating stuff. I was putting things in place. Year 2, I was miserable again. And my husband by then had gotten an opportunity abroad, and he wasn't around. And I remember we'd have to time our calls perfectly so that I could catch him just before he sleeps and just before I get to work. And I remember almost every single day that I was speaking to him, I was crying. And I was telling him how miserable I am, how I hate my work, how I hate where I'm working. And then he got an opportunity, and we were able to join him for a month with our daughter. And while I was there, he bought me a laptop. And he told me, you know what? You're a bright girl. Here's a laptop. Go start a business. Get out. You're not renewing your contract. When it comes to an end, it's over. I was like, whoa. All right. So I said, okay, I'll think about it. This was it was in December, and my contract was ending in August. So by August, I had a company registered called Totally Sorted Limited. Fantastic name. But it was called Totally Sorted because I had no clue what it was I wanted to do with it. So I needed something, just like do anything. So when I started, I was, again, fortunate enough to land myself an office. The guys I was working for had a random room somewhere that they weren't using. I asked them, can I use the room? They're like, sure, take it, but just pay us 5K. So I got an office for 5,000 shillings. Fantastic. Again, opportunities, great. So I used to go to this office, and I would sit there, and I would think, okay, I have an office. Okay. Then I go to the net, I do some research, figure out stuff. I'd do a lot of sleeping. I had a carpet. So I'd get under my table, I'd sleep. I'd get up, I'd take a walk, I'd come back, and I'd be there until 4:30. I was very dedicated to my business. I mean, how can I not be? I'd arrive at 7:30 and I'd leave at 4 o'clock. Yeah, that was my day. But I did absolutely nothing. Then one day I was taking a walk and I met a friend and she says, oh, what are you doing these days? And I told her, oh, I'm in business, I'm running a business. So she asked me, so what do you do? I said, so I went back to the last thing I used to do for my employer. I said, I create systems, I create policies, I do policy documentation, I do organization. She's like, you know what, we could use that. I'm like, fantastic, client number one, yay. And, but I must say, we gave her service at zero. I mean, I charged her almost nothing. Then, a few weeks later, I met another person. What are you doing these days? I'm doing processes. In fact, we have a client. We're doing processes for them. We're doing systems for them. Like, okay, that's good. Then he went and he told a friend who happened to be a lawyer and said, you know, your firm is very disorganized. Talk to this lady. She'll help you. And I did. I went, I worked for him. I did an amazing job. We organized his law firm. It was doing great. And now I was called a legal practice management consultant. Wow, fantastic. And I did that. 3 years I did it. And one day I was trying to build up the business now. I was saying, okay, I have an idea of what I'm doing. I'm building up the business. And then somebody came and took a look at my books and told me, you know what, Carol? Your life is very interesting. You're doing amazing work, but you don't have a business here. You are running a hobby. And I was horrified. 3 years of my life. And this guy is telling me that I am running a hobby. I was making no money. And he asked me, do you want to turn it into a business? I said, yeah, of course I want to turn it into a business. That's why I started it. And then he told me, you know what? You're going to have to do things differently. And he laid it out, and I looked at it, what I needed to do to make it into a business, and I ran for the hills. You guys, have you heard of people leaving their businesses? I ran. And just after speaking to my hubby and telling him, you know what, I don't think this business thing is working for me, opportunity. There's a business coming into the country. They're looking for somebody to help them out. They want somebody who's multi-talented, who can handle different things. Yay. I got the job. Fantastic job. I set up a business from scratch, got them premises, got the fit out done, bought computers, bought desks, hired their initial people, set up the launch. It was fantastic. And it was over. 1 year, amazing work. And I was out of work again. I'm like, okay, what do I want to do? So again, the stirrings of purpose came up, and I was starting to ask myself, what do I really want to do? But before I finished the thought, another opportunity came along. Somebody said, you used to work for law firms, right? You organize law firms, you build up their policies. We have a position for you. I spoke to them, and it sounded fantastic. So I joined them. And again, I can tell you within 1 month, I was miserable. I was so miserable. My principles and their principles didn't align. And I'm a very outspoken person, which doesn't augur very well when you're an employee, because you're supposed to do as you are told, not to consistently question what you're being told. But I was the one who was consistently questioning stuff. So it should not have come as a surprise to me when they did not confirm my probation. But it did. I think my head was in the clouds. And it was earth-shattering, because I'm a sharp person. I am diligent, I work hard, and I get stuff done. Isn't that the kind of person you want as an employee? But no, they didn't want me. So my probation was not confirmed, and I was out of work again. I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm like, okay, let me go back to Totally Sorted. At least I know what I was doing there. I have a bit of experience. I think now I can run a business. And the moment I had that thought, it was like 2 weeks hadn't passed. Somebody calls me and asks me, hey, are you still consulting for law firms? I'm like, yeah, I am. And I had a client, and so it went on. This was in 2014. And that is how it continued up until sometime last year, when now the stirrings of purpose came back, and I started asking myself, what am I really doing here, and how did I get here? Story number 1. I'm like Jeffrey Archer, I just leave it right there. Story number 2, of building your own prison. I was looking at your profiles before I came in, and I realized we are a very mixed lot here. So we have people here who've been in business, we have people here who've been employees of different organizations, we have pastors. And the current Kenyan dream seems to be, start a business, become an entrepreneur, employ people, create jobs, create wealth. Why do you have to be the one taking the salary home? So when I started my business, I was very proud of myself. I said, whoa, here's an opportunity to really be that. I can be an entrepreneur, I can create jobs, and I can do it doing stuff that I enjoy. Plus, it gives me freedom, because now I don't have to worry about leaving the office at 5 o'clock. I can leave at 4. I was such a bad boss. I put my work hours until 4 o'clock. I could have worked from 9 to 11, but I decided that my work hours were 7:30 to 4. And when I started, I thought, I was buying myself freedom. After all, I had taken a massive pay cut. Coming from employment into business, the first time round, because I've done it twice, I can't even work out this percentage. I think it must have been like an 80% pay cut. Shoop, down. And I thought, what the price I'm paying for this is I'm going to spend time with my children, I'm going to spend time with my husband, I'm going to be a good daughter, I'm going to spend time with my mother, my sisters, I'm going to visit friends. In fact, I have very many friends who are in the diaspora. I'm going to visit their mothers. After all, I have time. How wrong I was. After the initial run, I realized that I had gotten it all wrong. I had actually become a slave of my business, because I was permanently there, trying to build it up, working out the strategies. Who am I hiring? Who am I not hiring? How do I get more business? How do I win clients over? Am I doing the right thing? Do we need to improve it? Constantly. And even when you go to bed, it's just there. It's in your head. You wake up in the morning, it's in your head. So when I took that almost 2-year break and I came back to the business, I said, this time I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to structure my time. My working hours are 7:30 to 3:30. I'm going to have 1 day per week that I'm going to be able to dedicate to anything I want to, and that's how I'm going to work. And I did, and it worked for a while. But then I got caught up in the busyness of business. And before you know it, you are now having to meet expenses. You're having to pay rent. You're having to pay employees. And you can't pay employees on feel good, on feeling good. You can't say, whoa, I'm doing a great job, you guys, it's great. No, you need hard cash. So I needed to start looking for business. And I did, and I looked, and I strategized, and I thought about it, and I brought in people. And what this did is that it ended up sucking the life out of me, because now I was so busy, just getting stuff in order, that I forgot that I had a life that I was trying to build outside of the business. I was spending less time with my children. Yes, I would leave work at 3:30. I would pick them up and we would go home. But because my day was so full and so busy, by the time I get home, I'm exhausted. And I want nothing to do with anything. I want to sit down, I want to take my cup of tea, I want to watch a random series, I want to cook in silence. I didn't want to interact. And I realized, I'm really cheating myself here. And I realized this business that I had built myself in order to be free has actually ended up being my prison. And when everybody else looks at you, they think, wow, you have it all together, You run your own business, you pick your kids from school, you don't have a live-in nanny, which means you get to, involve your children in chores, you have it together. But from the inside, I was in prison. And it was really painful to realize that I have spent 10 years of my life, block by block, building up a prison. And I only realized it's a prison, once you put that final block and you're like, oh, wow, nice. Now let me get out and look at it from the outside, and you realize, oh my gosh, the door is locked. And now you have to find a way out. So I need to break out of prison. Story number 3, of painted windows. When I met Joshua, one of the first things he asked me to do was to envision. He said, think about your future. Where do you want to be in 10 years' time? And I said, all right, that's not difficult. I'm a creative. I have a good imagination, have a pretty good life. I'm sure, I told him, give me 3 weeks. I'll have a perfect picture painted for you. So I went away and I started thinking about it. In fact, I'm a bit of a creative, so I love pens, I love paper. So I went out and I bought a special notebook and I bought special pens so that I can enjoy the whole process of creating this vision. And I thought about it and I thought about it. And week 1 passed and I had nothing. 0. I'm like, okay. So what does this mean? I'm like, all right, you still have 2 weeks. Don't panic. Let's try it again. I'm like, all right, so what do I want to do in 10 years' time? I'm like, all right, let me divide my life. Family. I'm like, okay, in 10 years' time, my daughter should have finished campus. Hopefully, she'll be in her first job. Second one should be in campus, whatever it is that she's going to be doing. I'm like, all right, my husband loves what he does. He'll probably still be doing that. What about you? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, let's pack that aside. Let's think about other things. What about career? Nothing. Leisure? Nothing. Like, yeah, okay. Where will you be living? Nothing. Will you be farming? Nothing. I had absolutely nothing. And I started feeling claustrophobic in my own life. I started thinking, why am I hemmed in? And for me, I felt like I was in this room, probably that same prison that I had built. And it had windows, but the windows are painted over. Because the outside still exists. It's there, just that I can't see it. So I was in a position where I could not see my future. And after I got over the panic, I decided, let me create something that I can then work with, because evidently this vision is not going to happen. So let me start thinking about how can I get to see. And I said, if I am in a room with painted windows, the only way that I'm going to see outside is if I clean those windows. So I need to discover, what is it that is covering my windows? What is that paint? And what do I need to use to remove it? Am I going to use a razor blade? Am I going to use turpentine? But I need to clean these windows. And that is then, I would say, where things started coming together for me, because then now I started looking at what I am doing. I started really questioning every single part of my life and asking myself, is this part of my life part of my vision, or is it the paint on the window? And I realized that the greatest part of the paint on my windows was actually in my business. I was so shocked. I was so sad. I'm like, I've spent 10 years building this up, and now you're telling me that I need to get rid of it? And the more I thought about it, the more I prayed about it, the more I meditated upon it, I realized that the only part of my business that I enjoy is the part about impacting people. Nothing else. I hated managing it. I hated managing the people. I hated managing the projects. So in my entire day, I'd say maybe 5 to 10% is the only part that I enjoyed doing and that I did well. The rest I only did well because somebody has to do it, and I couldn't afford to pay somebody else to do it for me. So I took a very bold decision, and I decided to shut down the business. Now, when you say it that way, it sounds very easy. Close the doors and go away. It isn't. Because the business is a running business. It has clients who are depending on you for services. It has members of staff who are depending on you for salaries. It has a landlord who's waiting for you at the end of every month to pay him something. And when I decided that I'm going to shut this down, it meant that I had to think about each and every one of those and figure out, so these clients, what am I going to do with them? Where do they go? Who services them? How do they still get what they need to get if I am no longer in the picture? My staff, where do they go? What do they do? And I had to get to a point where I had to accept that if it is not in God's will for me to be in this business at this point in time, then I need to get out. And in the same way that he is able to provide, in the same way that he is able to say to me, you know what, get out, there's something for you, is the same way that for my members of staff, that he has something for them too, and that they will be able to find something, and that I cannot carry every single bit with me. That at some point I actually have to be able to say, you know what, this is not mine to carry, and I have to let it go. But it has been painful. There are days I have gone to the office. One day in particular, I remember I went to the office and I have a little door stopper. You know those little black door stoppers? So there's a door stopper there, and I got to the office, I opened my door, and I kicked the door stopper in place. And I looked at that door stopper, and I broke into tears. And I was like, okay, I'm not an emotional person. Why am I crying over a door stopper? And I was like, you know what? I have to think about this door stopper. Like, this is crazy. So, but that process has actually started to open up things for me, because the more that I am able to let go of the things that I am not supposed to be doing, the freer my mind, my heart, my psyche is to be able to accept the things that I am. I have had to do a lot of self-evaluation. I've had to do a lot of self-rediscovery. Just finding out, you know, what are my strengths? What are my giftings? Am I using my giftings? Can I use them in a better way? Who do I need to surround myself with to build them up and to see how it is I can be able to move to the next step? And this process has been enlightening. It has been very freeing. And the surprising thing is that the people around me, whenever I tell them one of my self-revelations, they're not surprised. They're like, yeah, that's what you should be doing. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me? You watched me for 10 years, throwing my life away. You should have told me. But, well, that is where it was. So those are my stories. And, I mean, there are many others. But what have I learned through this entire season? I cannot say that I am there yet. I do not know where there is yet. But these are some of the things that have come to me. So, of course, you can't speak about purpose without thinking about Jeremiah 29:11. And I know for many of us, I mean, this is one of the first memory verses that we are able to really capture. And I think because it's very calming, it just tells us, you know, everything is going to be okay. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. But we always forget the season in which the Israelites were being given these words. They were not sitting here nicely, you know, everything was okay. At this point, they were exiles. So they were essentially refugees. So this is you going to Kakuma and standing there and telling a person who last saw their home 40, 50 years ago, who doesn't know whether their parents are still alive, who doesn't know whether their relations that they left behind are still there, who doesn't know if they decide to go back what they shall find, and you're telling them, don't worry, I know the plans I have for you. And Jeremiah was telling them, marry, you know, don't stop your life. Marry, have your children get married. Yeah, in other words, he was telling them, you know, live for now. There is a future, yes, your future might not be here, but guess what? Here is where you are. And you have to still live in the now in order to get to your future. So they had to make the best of where they were, even as they knew that they were still going to get somewhere. And my big question is, how do I know my purpose? How do I know what it is God has set out for me? And even when I know, how will I know when I get there? You know, it's not like Google Maps, you know, tells you you have arrived at your destination. I don't think that is going to happen. So how will we ever know? And what I have come to decide is that God is the master weaver. He is the one who puts everything together. He is the one with the big picture. He's the one who knows where each and every one of us fits within that big picture. And what is our responsibility? Our responsibility is to stay tuned, to stay aligned, so that in every little bit of what we do, we are within His will. And when I say every little thing, I'm not talking about the big spiri things, you know, oh, I attend service, I serve, you know, I speak in tongues. I'm talking about daily living, your finances, Where are you with your finances? Is God happy with you? Are you doing the right thing? Are you being a good steward? Your time. What do you do with your time? Is he happy with what you're doing with your time? Is he able to say, wow, good stuff? Your relationships. And I'm not just talking spousal, I'm talking all relationships. Your parents, your sisters, your brothers, your colleagues at work. Are you in line with God's will in your relationships? What do you read? What do you listen to? What do you watch? How do you respond to issues? What is it that you say when something comes up? And if I am able to align myself in every little thing, then the purpose ceases to be such a big thing that, I have to keep on, constantly running after. It becomes I am aligned. And in being aligned, then for sure, I will attain that purpose. And in Jeremiah 18:5, the more I looked at this, I thought, maybe when you're doing purpose, you need to study Jeremiah, because everything was in Jeremiah. So in Jeremiah 18:5, the Lord declares, like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. And again, I don't know whether it's just human nature, but we like to look at the positive side of things, oh, you are the potter, I am the clay, mold me, shape me, make me into whatever you want to make me. But if we look at the next verses, what do they say? If at any time I announce that a nation or kingdom is to be uprooted, torn down and destroyed, and if that nation I warned repents of its evil, then I will relent and not inflict on it the disaster that I had planned. And if at another time I announce that a nation or kingdom is to be built up and planted, and if it does evil in my sight and does not obey me, then I will reconsider the good that I had intended for it. So putting ourselves in God's hands as the potter means that we are also amenable to change. It means that today your purpose might be that you need to be, serving in a particular ministry in church. Great, that's fine. But if God says tomorrow, you know what? I think you are better placed, going out somewhere, and ministering there. Then don't stick there and say, no, but you said this ministry is the one that is for me. I'm doing it so well. Look at all the people I have impacted. No. We have to remain amenable. We cannot afford to let ourselves become stiff and hard in God's hands, because otherwise, he will break us. Because that's what happens to clay when it dries up and becomes stiff. It is no longer malleable. Then finally, we also need to remember that sometimes your purpose can be very clear to you, but you are not ready for it. And it has happened so many times in the Bible. Look at Joseph. His purpose was clear from when he was a very young boy. He knew that he was going to be a ruler. He knew that others were going to bow down to him. He knew. But he had to wait. He had to go through things in order to become ready to do his purpose. Look at Moses. He knew that he needed to lead the people out of Egypt. He knew that from very early on. But he had to go through stuff. He had to leave Egypt himself, go and toughen up and become the person who can then come and lead the Israelites out. Look at David. David became king very young. But how long did he have to wait to actually sit on the throne and rule? He had to wait a long time. And finally, think of Jesus. Jesus knew his purpose right from the get-go. But it wasn't until 30 that we actually see him coming out and doing the stuff that he was supposed to do. So who are you and who am I to demand that, my purpose must be now, and when I know my purpose, I must fulfill it, and I must do it now? Because if we become so torn up and so hung up on that purpose, then this is how we end up doing the wrong thing. This is how we end up sticking to something that is not supposed to be. This is how we end up taking corners and shortcuts. You start saying, oh, my purpose is to ensure that, just as an example, I'm going to build up a youth church within Nairobi Chapel, Ngong Road. They're going to have an amazing building. That's my purpose. And then because you're not listening and you're not malleable, you keep at it even when it is not what God wants you to do. So we need to know that sometimes, even when your purpose is clear, you still have to wait. My take-homes from this are that, one, I need to remain aligned and attuned in every single thing that I do. Second, I need to be willing to look in the mirror, not to find my purpose. I wouldn't find my purpose in the mirror. But I need to take a look in the mirror and just see, who exactly am I? What is it that I am doing? And I need to be honest with myself when I look in that mirror. I can't go there and, pat my hair and say, oh, it looks fantastic and it's very messy. No. I need to be able to look at it and say, you know what, that hair needs to go. And then make it happen. So even as you look at yourself in the mirror, look at yourself in terms of your personality, in terms of your giftings, in terms of what it is that you're doing, in terms of different facets of your life, and just accept where you're at. And if it is not in the right place, accept that you're going to have to do something about it, and that chances are it's going to be painful. So my consolation is Jeremiah, once again. Jeremiah 1:5. And Jeremiah 1:5 is, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. So it's not about me here and now. My purpose has been laid out. It is clear to God. Mine is to align, to obey, because he already knows, and he has already put me together in that way that is going to ensure that I actually achieve it. When I looked at the dictionary definition of purpose, it occurred to me that we approach purpose in the wrong way. We tend to assume that purpose equals goal, but a purpose is not a goal. Here's a dictionary definition. Purpose is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. It is not a goal. Purpose is not a goal. And therefore, when I think about purpose, I think of purpose as a path. And my definition for my God-given purpose is living in God's will every step of the way. All right. Thank you very much.